MEL 360 in practice webinar sessions, but it is really, as you will see, a participatory workshop, hands-on training, much more than a webinar. So we do expect you, and we hope that we can foster conversations and a safe place for everyone to reflect and connect and build on this practice together. So over the next 4 sessions, we're going to explore how MEL can move beyond measurement to become a tool for reflection, adaptation, and real systems change. So why are we here? Thank you again for introducing yourselves. If you could also, in addition to introducing yourselves, drop us an emoji or a word in the chat just so we can know how you're arriving today to this workshop. That would be most welcome. Great. I'm starting to see smiley faces, eager to learn. Amazing. So great energy, everyone. And we hope to meet you where you are. So just to introduce myself, I want to tell you a quick story. So you can see why I jumped into this space and sort of like what was my perspective coming in. And you might relate to what I went through. So a few years ago, I was part of a project that had all the right pieces. So it had clear indicators, it had a solid log frame, great reporting, and on paper, it was a success. But as we spoke with communities, the story sounded different. They saw that we were conducting a lot of activities, but there wasn't real transformation. And the results were looking good, but the system itself wasn't stronger because of our project. So that moment really stayed with me. And it made me start asking, what are we learning the right things? Are we actually asking the right questions about how change really happens on the ground? So that's what led me to Systems MEL. And for me, as an anthropologist turned agricultural economist and with experience in randomized controlled trials and quasi-experiments, it really helped me connect the rigorous measurement that I craved and that I was most experienced on with the reality of complex systems, where progress, as you all know, depends on relationships, feedback, and learning, and not just the outputs and outcomes you create. And this is exactly what this series is going to be about. So as many of you know, we have created this MEL 360 guidance with support from the Gates Foundation. And as you know, this is a new resource for Systems MEL in food systems and other complex settings. And it offers practical tools and a flexible framework to support systems-aware MEL across projects and portfolios. Again, we called it a webinar, but it is a hands-on participatory training with plenty of time for pause and reflection, discussion, as well as practice. And for all of you, we do recommend that you join all sessions because they build on the last session, but the tools are very much modular and you can use them, as we will explain, at any stage of your MEL process, whether you're designing, implementing, or evaluating. But now I just want to give a few minutes to introduce the wonderful facilitation team that's here with us. So I will pass it on to our team. Zazie, my brilliant co-author, if you want just to say a couple words about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. So I'm an evaluator through and through that's been working in programmatic MEL for a really long time, 20 years. And then was lucky enough to start working with people that are working on systems transformation theories and approaches, and was asked to come and work with them to work out what's the systems MEL alongside. You know, how do you do MEL in a system transformation effort? So it's been really wonderful. Like almost 8 years now. And it was fabulous to work on this project with Andrea and other colleagues. Shall I hand over to Sue?
Please.
Hi,
Yes.
everyone. Hi, colleagues. Most of you know me from the MEL Sandbox, which sits within the wider UNDP SMLE team, SMLE project. I am a learning practitioner and basically describe myself as a baby systems practitioner. So like many of us, I'm trying to figure out that balance between doing MEL that looks at accountability and outputs and situating it within a system of complexity and understanding that some of the development problems we're working on are really sticky and knotty. So this project has really sharpened my edge for experimenting with these practices and asking certain kinds of questions. And I'm really glad to be doing it alongside you all. I'll pass on to Bianca.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bianca. I'm part of the M&E team at the UNDP Global Food Systems team, and I have been working also as part of in project coordination of this SMLE project. So also experimenting with all these tools internally and learning a lot from all the Systems MEL practice. So over to Federica.
Thank you, Bianca and colleagues. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to see many of you joining us today. You've probably seen so many emails from me. I work as the MEL community consultant together with my colleagues. I joined last year the SMLE initiative, and also I'm looking forward to learning with you today and collaborating with you all. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you so much, colleagues. So let's dive in. First, we are going to do a quick run through of how this series will unfold. So today we are going to start with the foundations. So what is systems monitoring, evaluation, and learning, why it matters, and we are going to start explaining and describing what we call the orientation lens, which are very helpful in setting direction and intent. And we will focus today on the strategic intent specifically. In module 2, we're going to wrap up the orientation lens and we're going to move on to the spiral, which is this continuous learning cycle that supports learning and adaptation. Module 3 is going to be more hands-on, so we're going to explore in a bit more detail the MEL 360 platform, and we're going to practice and apply what we call the how-to sheets with your own teams or examples. And in module 4, we're going to come together for an interactive Ask Me Anything. So we will ask you in advance to submit questions, issues, challenges you're facing, and then we will also share them with a broader group to see how we are building on our own practice together. And throughout this space, as I said, you're going to have space to connect with peers, share what's working, how you're experimenting with this practice, and ideally co-creating how Systems MEL is looking for us all. Great. So for those of you who plan to complete the series, you will receive a UNDP certificate of completion if you attend all 4 sessions and complete the short reflection assignments we will be sharing with you at the end of each module. So you will get one today. However, we understand that life happens. So if you do miss a session, you can absolutely watch the recording and still qualify to get a certificate by submitting your reflection or take-home assignment, which is going to be very short. It won't take you more than 20 or 30 minutes to complete. And of course, if any questions come up, my colleague Federica and myself are available for you. Our emails are right here, and we will also be sharing this slide deck with you all. So you can have access to it during the presentation, and that you can also review it at your own pace at home or at work, and it serves as a resource for you because it has a nice summary of some of the approaches and concepts in the guidance. I will pass it on now to my colleague Fede for the community guidelines, who will also do a quick run through all the tech that we are going to be using today. So on to you, Fede.
Thank you, Andrea. And as you are seeing, we are recording this session and we will also record the next ones. So just in case you would like to not appear in the video and the recording, please feel free to turn off your camera. Otherwise, we would really love to see your face. So please, we really encourage you to turn on your camera. And just another note that we will only record the main room, not the breakout rooms activities. So please feel free to speak up and turn on your camera. We also would like to remember for you to mute yourself while you are not speaking, and also please share your ideas via the chat box. Also, we will use a Miro board throughout this session, and there you will have a space to share any question, comments, and also please feel free to raise your hand for speaking, and we will give you space to do so. Also, we would like to remind you to be respectful while sharing any type of feedback. But before moving into the content of the first module, I would like to ask you whether you are familiar with Miro board, Mentimeter, or if you had any experience with any breakout room activities in the past. Please feel free to react with a thumbs up, if so. I am not seeing any reaction, but maybe
There's
it's
quite a few,
There's a
Fede.
lot of reactions. Yeah.
amazing. I'm glad to hear so. So before moving into module 1, I would quickly like to show you how Miro works. If you can give me just 1 second because it's reconnecting. Okay, great. So we would like, as I mentioned before, for you to share any questions in this frame that is a kind of corner for questions, comments, and suggestions. And for doing so, you can indeed use the full hand here and then turning into an arrow and grab a sticky note and type here any type of comment or question by using different colors. For exploring and zooming in and out of the Miro board, you can see at the button here on the right a zoom out function and a zoom in. And for moving around, you can turn into your full hand here and grab around the content. As you can see, we will also have an interactive exercise later, and each frame has a number here. So you will be assigned to a breakout room for the following activities. So please feel free to look into the number that has been assigned and go directly to the same number of the frame. And as I mentioned before, we will also have other interactive exercises. So going back to my presentation, you will see we will also use Mentimeter. We will share with you a code, and you are feel free to use your laptop or mobile phone, and we will share with you a code. And there you are able to reply to any sort of question by tapping in or selecting a choice. And just a quick reminder that while working in breakout groups, in case you have any trouble, please feel free to use the option to ask for help. And us facilitators will be able to help you and join the breakout room. So I think that's it. I'm gonna look into the chat in case you have any questions. And over to you, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Fede. And again, as Fede mentioned, we are here if you need any support from us. Okay, we understand that we are doing our best to make this workshop participatory, and that just means, because of the online nature of it, that we have to use this tech tool. So bear with us if there's any glitches, as we are all trying to do our best, but we'll be here to troubleshoot if there's any issues. Wonderful. So let me just go through the agenda for today. What are we going to be working on today specifically? The first bit is that we will start by surfacing our own perspectives on MEL. So what it looks like in your context and what you wish it did more of. Then we're going to do an introduction of Systems MEL, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. What is it and why it matters for complex systems? And after that, we're going to start exploring the orientation lens, which is a powerful way to get grounded before diving into action or into your project implementation. And finally, we'll wrap it up with a few takeaways and a quick reflection. Again, we're going to keep things very interactive, so plenty of time to reflect, chat, connect with peers. If you meet someone interesting, please get their contact information, and we do hope that you continue the conversation from here. Wonderful. So we are going to start with a group reflection, the first one of the day. We are going to connect you in small groups to share a bit more about your current MEL work. So when you get to your breakout groups, which Fede will do as soon as I finish the instructions, we ask you to reflect in a couple of questions. The first one, how would you describe your MEL work or practice today? As we know that all, if not most of you, most if not all of you are MEL practitioners and have some experience working on MEL. If not, you can talk about what you've learned and your experience with projects in general. And then please discuss what brings you here today. What brings you here to this series where we are discussing how to push the Systems MEL practice. So don't overthink it. Just a couple minutes is plenty for each person. And this is, again, about listening and connecting. And when we come back, we are going to be capturing in a more collective way what we wish MEL could do more for us in a quick poll. So on to you.
Hello everyone, welcome back. I think we are all here. Andrea, over to you.
Thank you, Fede. We hope everyone had a good discussion, that you got to meet interesting people. Feel free to drop a message in the chat if you want to share how your conversation went. And we are going to move on to a very quick exercise to oh, we are hearing. Thank you for muting yourselves if you're not asking a question or intervening. Great, thank you all. So now it's time to do a very quick collective discussion. So you just talked about what MEL looks like in your own practice. Now we're going to ask you to think about what you wish MEL did more of for you. So please open the Mentimeter link. You can scan the QR code here on the slide if you want. And this is an open-ended question. That is, what's one thing that you wish MEL did more of? And please drop your answer. And as you're thinking, you can consider things such as learning from failure, adapting to change, listening to communities, shifting systems, not outputs. And we're going to see what common themes emerge. So I'll just give you a minute to respond to these questions, and we'll see what's popping up.
Thanks a lot for sharing your responses. Here we can see different answers that you're sharing with us. What's one thing you would like MEL to do more? You wish MEL did more of? Improve systems, lessons learned, Learning from mistakes, that's an important one, right? That we just don't continue without correcting and learning from the mistakes. Learning into action, being more agile, of course, helps us understand and navigate systems rather than reinforcing linear ways of thinking. That's a great one. Show clear insights to adapt to territorial difference and communities. Question the nature of what we do, exactly, like being critical about what we are doing, shifting towards triple loop learning, allow more flexibility, encourage real learning than just ticking a box. That's an important one that we know we many times are encouraged to do, like tick a box and just move on without really stopping and reflecting, right? Measuring how sustainable results of projects, be easy and valued, measure and reflect collectively. I wish Mel did more with the learning, incorporating systems thinking and complexity and being participatory. That's a great point and something that we're going to discuss today, how we need to put learning as in the center of how we do Mel. That Mel is not treated as a separate activity and gets input from program implementers. That's another great point that we also will encourage as part of Systems MEL, that MEL is not a separate function, but we are all doing MEL all the time. Extract learning easily, faster feedback, give space for emergence. That's critical. Critical reflection on what value means. Synthesize data and results into more coherent systemic recommendations. Utilize in decision making. That's super, super important, that data and all the spaces that we hold are used for decision making. Otherwise, the data and the time spent is lost. Measure not only outputs, measure change and club the loop. We had a lot of participation, almost 81 people joining. So thanks a lot for sharing. And we hope all these wishes can be a reality soon with our support and learning together this Systems MEL approach. Over, Andrea.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your participations. And we absolutely see several common themes. And the key point here, as Bianca was describing, is that, well, none of these are unrealistic, right? But they're hard to achieve with the way our commonly known MEL, traditional MEL, dominant paradigm MEL is usually structured. Because that type of M&E MEL is designed for predictability and proof, and not really for learning in complex evolving systems like the ones we're used to working with. You know, for instance, for us, it's food systems, climate programs, climate change. And what if MEL, however, could help us actually expand what we can learn, adapt, and how to respond to complexity in an agile way, and also considering what value means from different perspectives. So we are going to have a look at how we can do that. So give me just 1 second to start sharing my screen. So again, traditional MEL is great at tracking your indicators, your outputs, meets reporting needs, and helps demonstrate results. These practices are essential. So by no means are we suggesting that we drop this. These are essential, again, for keeping projects accountable and responsible, and specifically because we all, or most of us, work in donor-funded work. But when we work in complex systems, cause and effect, as we know, are not linear. We have actions interactive, feedback loops forming, and outcomes emerging in unexpected ways. And that's where Systems MEL really expands what MEL can do. It layers a new way of learning and reflecting together. It's going to still track results, but it also helps teams see and learn what's changing and what's emerging from the system, not just what we are delivering. It focuses on contribution rather than attribution. It surfaces these underlying dynamics, such as power dynamics and relationships that shape systems change, and strengthens coherence and responsiveness across teams and partners. So in short, we are trying to move from a MEL that is just more about measuring and reporting, and as you have said very well, an afterthought that gets bolted at the end, to a MEL that actually creates insight and supports long-term transformation. So let's think about what is the value that Systems MEL adds and how it can help, how it feels in practice. So this takes from systems thinking practice, and we talk about using different ways of seeing and working compared to the more traditional MEL we might be used to. So how do we actually think and learn systemically? These ways of seeing help MEL teams stay focused on learning, connection, and change. And you might be familiar with several of these. Again, these take from systems thinking, and those are zooming in and out. So we ask you to step back to see the bigger picture and then focus on what's shifting within the system. We encourage teams to map connections, to pay attention to relationships, who is influencing what, and where are those linkages. Also, to question assumptions. Ask what beliefs or models might be shaping how people act. Also, to look for feedback. What's reinforcing or changing the current pattern? Very importantly, include diverse perspectives. We always need to be asking ourselves who's shaping the system and who might be missing from the conversation. So these ways of seeing and working help MEL be grounded in the real dynamics of change and helps team stay responsive and focused on learning, not just on tracking results. But for this way of working to take hold, we talk about certain conditions that need to be in place within teams, organizations, and the wider system. So this is what we call the enabling conditions for Systems MEL, which are the foundations that make it possible in practice. So they include things like stakeholder leadership, flexible funding, data use for learning, etc. But I will pass it on to my colleague Sue, who will walk us through the 6 areas or domains, and then we will move on to a quick group exercise to see where your teams, where your practice is today. So on to you, Sue. Perhaps Sue is having some tech issues. Do you want to jump in, Zazie?
Let me present. Oh, okay. Go for it, Sue.
Thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, just making sure my network is good.
How about I start and Sue can come in and take us through the activity. So these were in discussions when we were developing the guidance. These are the conditions that we identified as a group, and obviously there was a lot of discussion around them. These seem to be critical in either supporting or holding back your attempts and efforts to integrate Systems MEL into your existing MEL programs and systems, etc. So leadership and culture is really important. Like if you can have someone, or if you have someone in the organization that is behind this, then it really helps you to open up an authorizing environment in which you can take this work forward. If you don't, it can be really problematic, right? And this can also unlock resource allocation, a shift towards a different way of working, etc. Skills and capacity. So technical MEL skills and continuous training is important. One of the things that we're finding, particularly in Systems MEL, is that in a way, we often have the technical capacities, but the things that we don't have are the relational capacities that we need to build over time and we need to better understand. So there's another layer, if you like, that we need to bring in. and working across teams, all of that stuff. It's a different way of working, right? So you need to build those skills and capacity. You need resources. One thing that's very clear is that this work takes time, and you need support to do it. So whether that's funding or just people, you need to have you need to have resources to enable the work for you to take on Systems MEL. Data use. So having access to data, being able to incorporate it into your evidence guides and databases is really important. This is something, particularly when you're working in collaboration, can be very tricky and political in terms of having access to data. So this area is actually quite critical and can become critical at key points throughout your journey. Funding incentives. So how do you get your funders on board? So you've got your leadership and management, which might, if you're working in a philanthropy, be the funders, but you might also have layers of leadership, including the management and also the people funding you. And lastly, very, very important, comes back to this idea of you're working on systems change in systems. We are part of the systems. And so it's very much about learning how to really connect and work with others. And so stakeholder engagement is key. And so that's another thing that needs to be in place for the work to happen. So Sue, can you take us through the exercise?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that, and apologies for dropping off. So as part of what Zazi's explained, I'll quickly try to share my screen, maybe. And Fede, do you want to stop sharing the screen? And I'll grab it. There we go. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, great.
So thank you. So what we would like you all to take a moment to reflect on is to look at what we're calling these domains around enabling conditions, and think about the context in which you are sitting or working at the moment, and do a quick scan or vote of where the energy is in your context. So one of the things that Zazi may or may not have mentioned is that not all of these conditions have to be in place in order for you to begin working systemically or to incorporate Systems MEL into your context. But if you can take a dot just on the right side of the screen, there are these little dots, and slide them on this scale. So one being the enabling condition is challenging or mostly challenging, and 5 being the space is open, or your context is enabling in this domain. And just take a moment to think through which of these different conditions are most open, which 1 or 2 are most open in your context, and any creative or practical workarounds you have devised or used. Because another thing we found is that colleagues are already intuitively aware of where there is energy, or where they can get allies or use data or partner with other departments in their teams in order to work systemically. So we just want to take a moment to reflect on that together. And then once you've picked the 1 or 2 domains that stand out, if you could also take a minute to think about whether a scan of this kind would work or be useful in your current workplace or practice, and why or why not. And we will ask 2 or 3 people to share on that at the end of the session. So I see people already in there, and we'll give you a few minutes to do that in the breakout rooms. Thanks, Fede.
Thanks, Sue. And just before moving into the breakout room, we would like to remind you that now you will be assigned to a breakout room that has a number. So please look into the number of your breakout room and go to the mirror board and look at the number of the frame. And from there on, you can work on that frame in the mirror board. For any question, please feel free to ask for help. I am going right now to open the breakout rooms. Thank you.
Worked both for philanthropy and for public sector, and she felt that the public sector was really kind of systems and compliance oriented. So actually she'd had a much richer experience in philanthropy. TA in general is underfunded, and MEL within that is very underfunded, especially at the field level. and there's another member of our team from the private sector, and they said disclosures are helping more data become available, but people don't really know what to do with it, and there's poor systems for data. So we had a real mix of different organizations in our group, and the conversation was just getting going. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. Would one other person like to share?
My name is Mary Sue. I'm just going to jump in. In our group, we had a lot of problems with the dots. However, we started to have when we finally gave up with the dots, we finally started to have the conversation, and it was helpful to have that tool to reflect. Just a comment on the tool itself.
Thank you. I see a hand from Lourdes.
Yeah, maybe just since as a mini comment, I think our group had a lot of organizations, so UNDP and FAO, and one thing I think that stands out to us is how challenging it is to do this because people are constantly tasked to do more with fewer resources. I think there's commonalities because so we create groups in order to test this out. One of my colleagues, Martha, one of my group mates was talking about how they test it out by getting a group together and building trust and confidence in this. But I guess what stands out to me is like, how do we do this institutionally without almost burning out, not at a personal or emotional level, but the capacity to do this seems really stretched.
Thank you, Lourdes. And that is a big one. One of the enabling conditions that we debated about for a while was just time. People don't have much time, and when it gets busy, some of these more strategic learning-oriented practices get pushed aside for delivering. So that is a very live question. I'm going to hand back to Andrea to move us along. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you for the rich discussions, everyone. I was speaking in some of the conversations, and we appreciated hearing both the progress as well as the challenges in implementing these systems in our own MEL work. So now we do want to dive into what the journey is going to be, and you will be able to find all of these materials in the MEL 360 website. But let me just give you a big picture of what the framework that we have developed is about. So first of all, please know that this is a flexible framework. We've designed it to support systems-informed MEL, and we like to say that it is theory-informed and practice-driven. And as you will see, it's grounded in systems thinking, complexity theory, but also because it was designed by practitioners, it is based on what we've learned from years of working with MEL teams across different sectors, such as food systems, climate change, even workers' rights, etc. You are going to recognize some familiar ideas in this framework. So for instance, system boundaries, some of you might be familiar with, the domains of change, which are adapted from frameworks such as the Waters of Systems Change and the work of Peter Senge and other seminal systems thinkers. And it is important to note that this isn't a rigid sequence. Teams don't have to start at the same point or move in a fixed order. But it does help to have an idea of the overall structure. So the orientation lens are typically used early in the process. So we recommend it during design, strategy development, or planning because it helps teams clarify intent, boundaries, what is within the team's control or where they can just influence, and then also where change needs to happen, which we call the domains of change. And then we move through the spiral, which typically comes during implementation and learning, and it's how teams reflect, adapt, but also revisit their strategic intent, their system boundaries, as the context changes and as change unfolds. So it's a way of helping us stay responsive as systems evolve. Together, that's how we find that it can help teams stay aligned with complexity as it unfolds and really move clearly through implementation and reflection. One of the key takeaways, as you see from this framework and you've brought in before with your own perspectives, is that Systems MEL is not bolted on at the end. It is embedded from the very beginning, from the conceptualization of our initiatives. And it helps shape how teams plan, learn, and adapt through the entire change process. But again, this is not a rigid tool. And if you're not in design, you can absolutely jump into any of the areas of the spiral, and you will find that there are tools and approaches that you can tailor to your own practice. One last thing about this framework is that we've designed it mainly for internal MEL practice. However, on the MEL website, and we'll point it to you later, we do include links to external evaluations, be it systems evaluations, developmental evaluations, contribution analysis, among other types of evaluations. So what we're going to do is that we're going to be using for this learning experience a case study to walk you through the different areas, stages of the Systems MEL framework that we've developed. We will use, it's a composite case study inspired in a real project. However, there are some learning elements that we added to it. So we call it the Kenya Drylands Project. So let me begin by describing what the project looked like. And you might find yourself thinking like, oh, I've worked in projects like this. So this project started to help stakeholder farmers face shrinking grains and declining harvests. And in practice, their approach looked solid. They were working on providing inputs, diversification, building infrastructure, new boreholes, and working on better market access. So on paper, it worked. The plots were flourishing, incomes were rising, and the MEL, the reporting, everything looked great. But over time, cracks started to show. Boreholes broke down, women were left out of decision-making, and land and water conflicts grew. And charcoal, which they wanted to avoid, remained a fallback activity for many households. So a few years later, the team stepped back and asked a critical question. We deliver the results, but why don't we see that they're adding up to deeper change? And that specific moment of pausing to look beneath the numbers, beneath the metrics, is exactly what Systems MEL encourages. Using reflection to see what the system is telling us. Does this sound familiar to any of you? Have you worked or seen projects that hit their targets but missed deeper change? And drop me a reaction if you have experienced that or if that resonates with you. Yeah, I see many of us reacting to this. I think it's an experience that in one moment or another, we have been part of, and that's what we are trying to evolve that practice so that we can integrate layers that allow us to actually get to systems change and systems transformation. So back to the Kenya example. And thank you for telling us about your availability. We appreciate that we're reading the chat. So when the Kenya team began using Systems MEL, they absolutely didn't throw out their existing M&E system. Instead, they reframed it. They moved from technical fixes, as we call them, so working on inputs, productivity metrics, infrastructure, to what we call system stewardship. So what's beneath the surface, right? So they started working within the system, building trust, working on tackling power dynamics, on strengthening relationships and adaptive capacity. So they began, again, working on these issues and tracking them, and not just tracking outputs. And they built feedback loops. They did it through seasonal check-ins and community forums to learn and adapt in real time. So Systems MEL didn't add more reporting, but instead it layered new ways of seeing and using evidence. So what changed? What changed when the team introduced Systems MEL? Some of the we could see changes just not in numbers, but also in behaviors, relationships, and resilience. So for example, women's groups, co-design trainings, water governance became integrated, pairing boreholes with watershed restoration and local committees. Agroforestry expanded, restoring soils and retaining water, and community forums became part of the rhythm of work. And that helped surface early signals that we will examine later, which are the qualitative shifts that let us see what's happening in your system. And there were some very important tangible shifts. So for instance, charcoal use dropped, and farming and local businesses expanded, youth-led collective shortened supply chains, farmers shared and tested innovations on their own, and then the team could see a major shift in how the team became resilient. So for instance, during a major drought, instead of waiting for local aid, they relied on their local knowledge and their local strategies. So their seed banks, their local planning, their indigenous coping strategies, and those capacities that were invisible to the original M&E system. So that is what we see as the value of Systems MEL, to be able to learn from the system that we are part of and adapt as it evolves. And so we are going to be looking at how the team started with the orientation lens in their system before the action began. But first of all, let me give you the big picture of what are we going to be talking about. And these are the orientation lens. This is how we find our place in the system. This is where we actually sit and ask, where are we? What are we trying to change? And who else is involved? So the orientation lens helps teams get grounded in complex systems. Again, we recommend it during design, early planning, proposal development. However, you can always, and we encourage you to revisit it during midstream, during project implementation, when teams are ready or need a re-ground. We will be walking through this core foundational lens. The first one, the strategic intent, which is your shared direction for long-term transformation. Then we will move into the system boundaries, examining what's in and out of the scope of your initiative and why. And then we will walk through the spheres of control, influence, and interest, which are where you can act, what you can influence, and what you simply observe. And finally, on the domains of change, onto the domains of change, where we examine what shifts are happening in terms of these underlying dynamics that we've mentioned. So behaviors, but also changes in relationships, institutions, power dynamics, and mindsets. So without this grounding, we say that even strong MEL frameworks can drift off course. So let's move on to the first piece, the strategic intent. So again, this is your long-term vision for transformation, the direction you're trying to move the system towards. You might know it with different names. So this can be, for instance, your vision, your purpose, your North Star. And what's important is that it is not a fixed endpoint, but it is a directional anchor that helps teams stay aligned through uncertainty, trade-offs, and change. In traditional MEL, dominant paradigm MEL, we usually focus on project objectives. And the key difference is that project objectives are what we are responsible for delivering within a project's lifetime. It is what we are accountable for. The strategic intent goes further. It asks, what larger shifts are we contributing to? And how does this project help move the system towards that change? So very importantly, you're not going to be measuring your results against the strategic intent. Instead, you're going to be learning from your contribution to it. And that is what shifts MEL from proving results to actually understanding how we are helping the systems evolve. So without that anchor, we believe that MEL risks slipping into a few common pitfalls. It could be short-term focus, disconnected efforts, conflicting priorities, or a top-down bias that sidelines local voices. So this is, again, the first step on the orientation lens, or the first core area on the orientation lens. So let me just show you what it looks like in practice, what it looks like, for instance, in the Kenya projects. And so this original project, as I mentioned, the project objective was focused on productivity, on improving stakeholder incomes through inputs, technologies, and markets, and it absolutely made sense in a results-based frame. But as the cracks starting to emerge, the team realized that they needed a bigger frame. So they co-created it through community dialogues and involving different perspectives. So they created this strategic intent, which you see here. So for instance, it's by 2040, families in Kenya's drylands make a good living from farming that regenerates soils and water. Women and youth have fair access to markets and resilient livelihoods, even amid drought, price swings, or conflict. So notice how that intent connects economic, ecological, and social goals. And it's not about just productivity, but about the health and the dignity of the system itself. So how did they define that intent? And we are going to walk through these 4 areas or steps or elements that you can take to define your own strategic intent within your organization. So they started with purpose. They started by asking, is the system itself getting stronger? Are we building resilience or dependence? Importantly, and you will see this throughout our training, they co-created it with stakeholders. They brought women, elders, and youth into the discussion, so the vision reflected the shared priorities. They kept it directional, not prescriptive. It was guided by purpose, but flexible as new ideas and feedback emerged. So again, your strategic intent doesn't have to be set in stone. It is what guides your initiative. It is your purpose, but it absolutely has to respond to emerging conditions. And they kept the focus on transformation. So they defined success around stronger relationships, trust, and shared learning, and not just better yields or outputs. So that strategic intent became their compass. It grounded the day-to-day decisions in a bigger vision of the system, which meant talking about health and resilience. And it helped redesign their MEL approach based on this. Very importantly, most of us don't get to start from scratch, such as the Kenya Drylands project, right? So there aren't many projects that I've seen that have the luxury of starting fresh and design a strategic intent from the get-go. Many of us, because we work in donor-funded projects, we inherit project goals, log frames, project objectives that are already locked in, often, of course, by donors or higher-level programs. So that's where we talk about retrofitting. So retrofitting doesn't mean that you're rewriting the goal or that you're changing the project objective. It means how you reconnect to the bigger purpose. So what you can do in this case where you have a predefined goal or project objective, you can revisit the existing goal, asking what deeper system change is really pointing to. You can identify whose perspective shaped it, and perhaps more importantly, whose perspectives are missing. You can clarify your learning focus. What relationships or patterns are going to show what deeper change is happening? And you adapt your MEL practice. You keep compliance, you keep your metrics, but you layer in system levels insights. So that's how we believe that Systems MEL can help teams find purpose within structure, linking what's already predefined to what's needed for encouraging lasting change. And now we've just explored what a strategic intent does. It gives us a shared compass, but I want you to think about your own work or your own organization. And so we're going to do an individual reflection exercise. If you wanted to bring people together around a shared direction, where would there be already good conditions, good energy to make that possible? So we ask you to please join the Mentimeter. Again, scan the QR code or put the website domain and the code. And again, think about the domains that we've examined in terms of leadership and culture, skills and capacity, resources, data use, and try to answer, if you wanted to bring people together, where would there be the most enabling conditions or more energy to make that possible. So you can pick 1 or 2 areas where you sense that kind of readiness, and we will come back to it in just 1 minute.
Thanks for sharing your reflections here through the Mentimeter. We're seeing that in terms of like the enabling condition, it's through leadership and culture that you need to cultivate this, that you think you have a strong condition there to align towards a shared direction or strategic intent. Also, stakeholder engagement. Those are the 2 ones that are the ones that people are thinking more of. So I think thanks for participating on this. So over to you, Andrea.
Amazing. Thank you for the responses coming in. We are seeing that several of you perceive that there is higher energy on leadership and culture and stakeholder engagement. Excellent. Those are indeed critical if you are to create a strategic intent, and in general, how critical are these aspects if you actually want to push Systems MEL, right? So let's give just a few seconds so people finish answering.
I think we're done with the results now, Andrea. So over to you because we have 5 minutes left, so we can start
We
wrapping
only
up.
have 5 minutes left, but please, I know that there's a question. So please go ahead with your question, Mary Sue, I believe.
Yeah, I lowered my hand because there's only 5 minutes, but I just want to make a comment about data use. We collect in Oxfam, they collect an enormous amount of data. And it would seem to me that that could be a resource depending on how we frame the questions. That's why I chose data. I was the one person who chose data use, because it seems to me that, and I don't think that I'm alone in saying that so many of our organizations collect a lot of data. How we use it is sometimes incredibly poor. And it seems to me that if we think about how to raise different kinds of questions, somebody put this in the chat someplace, that we would be able to repurpose some of the uses of our data that could be also a way to
I think we lost Mary soon.
try to move this forward.
Great. Thank you, Mary Sue. We seem to have lost you a little bit there. Maybe you can add comments in the chat. Andrea, do you want to just take, there was a question on budget as well. So how the shift of strategic intent beyond just evaluating the achievements of project objectives would be reflected in the budget of the project.
Sorry, I'm just looking at it now.
I mean, just to put in a few points, often, so what's really interesting, I find with MEL, it's something that often falls off budgets, right? It's kind of assumed as an internal capacity. So there often isn't a lot of budget. It's usually people's time. And in my experience, what you end up doing is it's less about more money. It's more about asking people to do more work, to participate in more workshops, right? So it tends to be more time heavy. And sometimes it can be quite extreme, right? So these transitions, either whether you're integrating or you're wanting to fully shift to a place where you have both normal programmatic MEL and Systems MEL, it's a big endeavor to move over. And you do need to think about the implications in terms of how you do that on people's time, because it can be quite taxing. Andrea, do you want to add?
Yeah, thank you. I think just to clarify, and I know that there was a lot of information. Your strategic intent is not what you're accountable for, right? If you're working on a donor-funded project, you're still going to be accountable for your project objective. And on the MEL 360 website, you will find ways in which you can frame your contribution to the strategic intent. So you're not adding activities, you're not adding components to your project. It's just how do you bring together people, your stakeholders, to think about this collective vision and how that collective vision is going to be guiding your work. Okay, so that is the main point. So in that sense, it doesn't need to be reflected in the project, budget, etc., because it's your directional anchor in a way. So and this can be done you will find materials on the website in a participatory way. And this is participatory workshops, and you can even do it in one workshop, right? If you have the right people on the table. So as Zazie said, it's a bit more time, but it helps us learn more strategically. So why not, give it a little bit of extra time if it's going to result in higher engagement, because you have brought on different perspectives, and that, of course, will translate into more impactful results. We are at time, but just before we go, I did want to share very quickly the homework. We're not going to call it homework. We're going to call it a reflection exercise. This is going to be oops, this is not homework. Great. This is the homework. The homework is basically going to ask you to think about your own work and perhaps pick a project or a portfolio where you're working in, and to craft your strategic intent. And it has a few prompts as well that will help you get grounded. And of course, this is just an exercise. In reality, you would want to have different stakeholders on the table working on this, but just for this purpose, we ask you to craft it on your own based on the knowledge of your project or initiative. So to access it, you can scan the QR code, or you can click here in your Google Slides to the form, and you will be able to submit this. And as you submit it, it will need to have your name and your email, so we can match it to our records, and so that you get counted for homework or assignment number 1, and then you're on track to get your certificate as you complete the training. Any questions?
I'm presuming that the homework tells us where to send this. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. It is a form, so you complete it and then you just click submit, and it'll send automatically.
Thank
And
you.
if you have any issues, we did leave my email or my colleagues' email, but you can also use this email here, which all of us in the team here have access to. Okay, so any issues, any troubleshooting, please get in touch. We are here to support.
Thank you, everyone. It's been great. And to see so many of you at this session. Hope to see you again at the next ones.
Thank you.
Yes, exactly.
Bye
So we
bye.
will
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
next
you.
Tuesday.
Bye,
Okay,
thank you.
so
Tuesday.
Tuesday.